Imagine a city so magnificent it rivaled Alexandria, only to vanish overnight beneath the waves of the Nile. Before Egypt became a land of pyramids and pharaohs. Before Alexander the Great carved his name into the coast. Before the queens and conquerors turned the Nile into a cradle of immortality. There was a city whose story slept beneath the sea. A city that once guarded the kingdom, ruled its trade, collected its wealth, and then, one night, simply disappeared. Its name was Thonis, a lost port, a forgotten capital, a gateway between worlds. For centuries, it existed only in whispers, in half-remembered Greek texts, in fragments of stone inscriptions, in legends told by sailors who swore that beneath the Mediterranean waves they saw ruins shimmering in the depths. But history, like the tide, always returns. Today, we travel back, not through written pages, but through the silence of the sea, through memories held in salt and sand, through stories the earth tried to bury. Close your eyes. Imagine the northern edge of Egypt. 1200 BC, the Nile branches out into 7 arms, forming a wide delta where papyrus grows thick and fishermen glide through the waters. Beyond this peaceful green world lies the vast Mediterranean Sea, the great blue highway of ancient trade, and right at this border, where river becomes sea, where sweet water kisses the salt, where civilizations meet and merge, there stood Yon is Heracleion. It was a city of light and movement. Ships from Greece, Phoenicia, Crete, and Cyprus arrived daily. Egyptian priests in white linen robes walked through temples that towered over the harbor. Markets buzzed with life, gold, spices, ceramics, wine, perfumes, linen, cedar wood. And at the heart of it all stood a sanctuary dedicated to Heracles, the Greek hero, and to Ammon, the Egyptian god of creation. This city was not just a port. It was a bridge between cultures, a place where languages mixed, where rituals blended, where merchants prayed for safe passage before venturing into the unknown seas. But what makes Thonis-Heracleion truly remarkable is not only how it lived, but how it died. For centuries, historians searched for this place. Ancient Greek writers mentioned it, but no one could find it. Maps showed nothing. Archaeologists gave up. Some even believed it never existed. A myth, a misunderstanding, a city confused with Alexandria. But the sea never lies. It only waits, and in the year 2000, beneath 40 meters of muddy water, the lost city emerged, not in ruins scattered randomly, but in an entire underwater world, frozen exactly where it fell. Streets, temples, statues taller than 3 men, gold, coins, anchors, sacred writings, stone tablets, shipwrecks, dozens of them, perfectly preserved under the seafloor. Everything was still there, as if the city had drowned just yesterday. What force could sink a city this enormous? What night of terror pulled an entire civilization beneath the sea? Was it an earthquake, a flood, a curse, or something far more silent and far more patient? Tonight, we uncover the truth. We walk through the halls of a city swallowed whole. We listen to the voices of merchants, priests, sailors, people who once stood where only fish now drift. Welcome to Thonis-Heracleion, a city that sank overnight. A story the sea refused to keep hidden, long before Alexandria was born. Long before Cleopatra walked the palace corridors, Egypt's greatest gateway to the world was not a city of marble, but a city of water. Yon is Heracleion, was Egypt's primary international port between 11 BC and 700 BC, the height of the Late Bronze Age and the opening of the Iron Age. To imagine its importance, picture every ship entering Egypt passing through a single enormous harbor. Every trader, every diplomat, every soldier returning from the Mediterranean, every crate of Greek wine, every jar of Phoenician purple dye, every block of cedar from Lebanon, every bronze weapon, every grain shipment, all of it flowed through one place. The sea gate of Yon is Heracleion. Here, towering cliffs of stone anchored the shoreline. The temple of Amun-Gereb, the city's protector, rose like a mountain of limestone. The sanctuary of Heracles, the Greek hero, stood nearby, proof that cultures did not collide here. They merged. Egyptians prayed to Ammon for safe journeys. Greeks prayed to Heracles for strength. Phoenicians brought offerings engraved with strange symbols. Nubian merchants arrived with ivory, gold, ostrich feathers, and stories from deserts beyond imagination. Thonis-Heracleion was alive, a crossroads of the ancient world, a place where the Nile's blessings met the sea's dangers. Ships entered through a narrow channel, then spread into a lagoon as wide as a modern city. Docks lined the coast, wooden beams hammered into soft earth. Shifting with the tide, harbor workers shouted orders, hauling ropes, unloading amphorae, dragging crates of olive oil and honey. Priests walked beside sailors, sprinkling water blessed by Amen, chanting in the old tongue, "May the river carry you. May the sea forgive you." The city had no stillness. Day blended into night, night into dawn. The glow of oil lamps reflected on the water like 1,000 golden stars. But beneath all this beauty lay something dangerous. A silent flaw hidden under the very ground they walked on. Thonis-Heracleion was built on soft, waterlogged soil, the unstable, muddy delta where river meets sea. And as the centuries passed, the weight of temples, docks, houses, and statues heavier than elephants pressed the land downward. Little by little, inch by inch, the city began to sink. The people did not notice at first. How could they? The Nile rose and fell every year. Water was a friend, not an enemy. But the earth remembers weight, and the sea remembers everything. Still, the city flourished. Pharaohs sent officials to control taxes. Greek merchants established trading colonies. Priests guarded secret chambers filled with gold, and sacred relics. And then came the statues, colossal, monumental. Breathtaking. Frank Goddio's team would one day find them underwater. Lying sideways on the seabed, a 16-foot-tall statue of Hopi, god of the Nile, carved from black granite, a colossal queen, likely representing a Ptolemaic ruler, and a massive red granite stele weighing several tons, announcing the pharaoh's decree over trade and taxes in the port. These statues once lined the entrance of the temple complex, their shadows falling across priests and sailors alike. Imagine the sight: sunrise over the sea, golden light striking stone, a harbor awakening to life, a city filled with movement and prayer and possibility. No one knew that this same weight, this architectural pride, would one day pull the whole city beneath the water. But long before tragedy arrived, Thonis-Heracleion held a secret, a legendary ritual that attracted people from across the Mediterranean. It took place at night, by torchlight, by ritual, by devotion. The Feast of the Canal, a ceremonial procession for Ammon, where the god's statue was carried across the water to bless the harbor. This ritual appears again and again in inscriptions found underwater. It was the pride of the city, a reminder that gods walked among men. And then, one night, after centuries of celebration, the gods fell silent. Something began to change. The ground moved in ways no one noticed. The water rose higher than expected. The stones beneath the great temple shifted, and deep beneath the earth, forces gathered for a disaster that would strike without warning. But the people had no idea. They celebrated as always, drinking wine, lighting torches, guiding ships into the harbor, laughing under a sky full of stars. They didn't know that they were living in a city that had already begun to die. 3. The night of the sea's revenge. History often warns us. It whispers through trembling ground, through strange tides, through the uneasy silence before a storm. But the people of Thonis-Heracleion did not hear these warnings. How could they? Their city had stood for centuries. The Nile had always blessed them. The sea, though powerful, had always been generous. No one imagined that in a single night the balance would break. It began with something small, barely noticeable, a tremor beneath the temple floor, a vibration moving through the sand and stone. Priests paused during their evening rituals, just for a moment, wondering if the candles flickered too strangely. But they continued chanting outside, in the harbor. Greek sailors unloading amphorae of wine felt their ships tilt at an odd angle. They tightened ropes, murmuring curses, thinking the tide was unusual tonight in the markets. A few vendors noticed that water from the river seemed to creep slightly higher along the banks. But the Nile is alive, and no one questions the movements of a living river. Yet beneath their feet, beneath the streets and docks and temples, something catastrophic was unfolding. The soft delta soil, waterlogged, unstable, layered with silt from thousands of years, was beginning to liquefy. This process has a name today: liquefaction, when the ground suddenly behaves like water, losing all strength, all stability, all the ability to hold a city upright. But in the ancient world, no one knew what it was. They only felt the earth begin to fall in the temple district. A massive crack opened along the foundation stones. Torches trembled. Bronze vessels rang with vibration. A young priest, barely 20, dropped the sacred oil he was carrying. It spilled across the floor, reflecting the violent flickering of the flame. He looked at the high priest, eyes full of fear. But the high priest shook his head. "It is nothing," he whispered. "Begin the prayers." And they did. They prayed as the city began to sink around them at the harbor. A wooden dock groaned, bent, and then dipped into the water as if swallowed by an unseen mouth. Sailors screamed, jumping from ropes as entire ships lurched sideways. Crates rolled into the water. Amphorae shattered on stone. Oil flames danced across the surface of the sea. People stared at the water in disbelief. It was not behaving like water. It was rising, bubbling, moving in ways no tide ever had. Some ran home to their families. Some tried to save their merchandise. Others fell to their knees, believing the gods were angry. They were right, or so it seemed. For in that moment, the earth gave way. A section of the great temple slid downward by several feet, as if pulled by invisible hands. The colossal statue of Hopi, god of the Nile, leaned dangerously, its base grinding against stone. Priests ran from the chambers, shouting ancient cries of warning. Pillars tilted, frescoes cracked, sacred relics tumbled down the steps, and then came the water. The Mediterranean pushed inward with terrifying speed. Walls of water surged through the streets, flooding homes, drowning fires, sweeping away entire market stalls. Parents clutched children. Sailors raced to cut ropes. Women screamed for loved ones lost in the darkness. The sea, which had served them faithfully for centuries, returned as a destroyer. It was not a single wave. It was not a storm. It was the slow, relentless swallowing of a city whose foundations had already fallen apart. And then, the final blow. Not one earthquake, not one collapse, but a series of failures across the entire city. Streets buckled, houses cracked open, statues toppled into the water. The ground split wide, creating sudden pits that swallowed everything above them. People described the sound as if the earth itself were inhaling. Buildings leaned forward and disappeared. Temples tore apart. Ships, still tied to docks, were dragged under as the structures beneath them sank. The city died in darkness, chaos, and thunder. By sunrise, Thonis-Heracleion was no longer a city. It was an ocean. The survivors sailed away in silence, never understanding what had happened. They told stories of angry gods, of curses, of a divine punishment that struck the city for its pride. Generations passed. The sea covered everything. Memories faded. Maps erased the name. Historians debated whether the city even existed. Thonis-Heracleion passed from history into myth. It slept there in darkness, in silence, in deep water, waiting for someone who could hear its voice again. For more than 20 centuries, Thonis-Heracleion remained only a rumor, a name that flickered in old Greek texts, a whisper among scholars, a mystery dismissed by historians, who believed such a city could never vanish without leaving a trace. But the sea guards its secrets well, and sometimes it gives them back. The year was 2000. A French underwater archaeologist, Goddio, sailed along the Egyptian coast with a small team, a dream, and technology that had never been used here before. For years, he had searched for lost cities, the harbors of ancient kings, the sunken temples of forgotten lands. He believed the stories of Thonis. He believed the city existed, and he believed it would be found not on land, but beneath the water. Many criticized him. Many said the search was impossible, but the sea, quiet and watchful, had other plans. Goddio's team lowered a device into the water, a combination of magnetometer, side-scan, sonar, and sub-bottom profiler. This machine could see beneath the seafloor, detecting objects hidden under layers of mud and sand. Hour by hour, the machine hummed across the Bay of Abac. Lines on the monitor shifted, peaks, valleys, irregular shapes. At first it looked like nothing, just more sand, more emptiness. Then suddenly, a shape, a straight line, too perfect to be natural. Then a curve, massive, heavy, a block, a wall, a foundation, and then a colossal stone structure, lying on its side beneath 40 meters of dark water. Goddio's heart froze. Divers descended. The water was murky. Visibility minimal. Only beams of blue light cut through the darkness. And then they saw it, a massive statue head. Eyes closed, lips calm. As if the Egyptian god had simply fallen asleep beneath the waves. A few meters away, another head. Then an entire torso. A hand carved from granite. An enormous base with inscriptions. The divers rose to the surface in disbelief. This was no scattered debris. This was a city. A full city. Over the next weeks, they uncovered temple foundations, sphinx fragments, dozens of shipwrecks, bronze coins, stone anchors, gold jewelry, hieroglyphic inscriptions, ceremonial vessels, Greek statues, Egyptian statues, granite columns, a massive steely weighing 17 tons, but the greatest find lay half buried under sediment, a steely so large that it took divers weeks just to clear the mud around it. This stone slab contained a decree by Pharaoh I from the 4th century BC, a direct mention of Thonis as Egypt's official port for foreign trade. The myth was real. The city existed, and it was here. Each dive brought new wonders. A bronze statue of Osiris, still shining after thousands of years underwater. A stone naos, a sacred shrine with perfectly preserved carvings. A harbor basin larger than any known in the ancient world. Hundreds of small statues, offerings from sailors praying for safe passage. But the most haunting discoveries were the daily objects. Clay pots, still sealed with resin. Kitchen tools. Laundry weights. Perfume bottles. Children's toys. Wooden combs. Spindles of linen thread. Every item a whisper from a life interrupted. This was not a ruin destroyed by war. Not a city decayed slowly over centuries. It was a city that fell all at once, just as the legends said. And yet the biggest question remained. Why did it sink? What force brought down an entire metropolis? Was it the gods, as ancient Egyptians believed? Or was there an earthlier explanation? The answer would be uncovered, buried deep beneath layers of mud, in broken foundations, tilted temples, and split stone. A story written by nature, not by men. A city does not drown quietly. It does not surrender without warning. Its stones record the fear. Its walls remember the shaking. Its foundations tell the truth long after every survivor has turned to dust. To understand why Thonis-Heracleion sank, we must descend below the ruins, beneath the silt, beneath the broken temples, beneath the shattered docks, to the heart of the land itself. This delta, beautiful, fertile green, was built by the Nile over thousands of years. But beneath the surface lies a secret weakness, soft sand and clay mixed with pockets of water. For centuries, the people of Thonis built their world on this delicate foundation. They raised colossal temples weighing thousands of tons. They carved statues from granite, each heavier than a dozen elephants. They constructed docks for ships larger than some modern houses. The city became heavy, too heavy, and the earth beneath it began to sink. At first, only by millimeters each year, then centimeters, then inches, hardly noticeable. A slow-motion disaster unfolding quietly beneath their feet. But modern scientists call this process tectonic subsidence, the gradual collapse of waterlogged land. But this sinking alone could not destroy a city, no. It needed another force. Something sudden, something violent, and it came. Archaeologists found massive cracks in stone floors, walls snapped in half, columns tilted like fallen trees. These are not the signs of slow decay, but of violent motion, which means the city suffered a powerful earthquake, not one that levels buildings, but one that shakes the ground until it liquefies. Liquefaction, when earth becomes water and water becomes earth, is one of the most terrifying natural events on the planet. Imagine the ground beneath the city, suddenly behaving like quicksand. Streets turning into rippling waves, columns sinking straight downward, houses folding into the earth, temples tilting and sliding as if pulled by invisible hands. This is what happened. But this was only the beginning, because when the earth collapses, the sea answers. The Mediterranean surged inward, filling every new cavity, pushing ships, docks, and markets into the fractured ground. The harbor itself, once a calm lagoon, became a churning cauldron of sand, water, and collapsing structures. Archaeologists found shipwrecks stacked on top of each other like fallen leaves, evidence that several vessels were swallowed at the same time. This was a chain reaction: tectonic sinking, earthquake, liquefaction, sudden flooding, stone that no city could survive. And so, over the course of mere hours, centuries of life were pulled under. The temples sank first, their bases sliding sideways into the soft earth. The docks collapsed next, dragging ships with them. Then the houses, the markets, the statues, the shrines, the streets. Everything that had taken generations to build was consumed in a single night. But there is one more piece to this tragedy. Thonis-Heracleion did not just sink, it vanished. For after the earthquake, after the liquefaction, after the violent flooding, the sea did something devastating. It shifted course. The channels that once guided ships became choked with sand. The Nile's flow changed direction. Sediment filled the lake and harbor like a burial shroud. Within a few decades, nothing remained on the surface. The city that had once gleamed with sunlight and gold was now 40 meters below the water, sealed under mud which would protect it for more than 2 millennia. Thonis-Heracleion had died. But because it died so suddenly, so perfectly, so completely, it was preserved, a tragedy for them, a treasure for us. Segment 6. Life in a sunken city. When divers first entered Thonis-Heracleion, they expected ruins, broken stones, scattered debris, the usual remnants of a lost world. But what they found was something different, something almost alive. The seabed was not a graveyard. It was a paused city, a world caught mid-movement, as if time had tried to continue, but the sea had ordered everything to stop. It is rare in archaeology to find a place untouched by looters, unplundered by empires, unbroken by centuries. But Thonis-Heracleion was sealed beneath layers of silt, so thick, so smooth, so untouched, that when divers brushed it away, every object beneath looked almost exactly as it had the day the city drowned. They found a priest's insignia, still catching glimmers of light from the divers' lamps. Bronze coins stacked in clay jars like someone meant to return for them. Stone anchors lying beside wooden hulls of ships that still held their shape after 2,300 years in one place. They discovered a ship canal, perfectly preserved, walls intact, stone moorings undisturbed. More than 64 ships trapped beneath the earth like ghosts drifting in silent water. Imagine that. An entire harbor frozen in the moment of its collapse. Sailors jumping into the water, boats tipping sideways, crates falling open, spilling spices that dissolved into the sea. Divers found ceramic bowls, still stacked one inside another in the kitchens of drowned homes. Perfume flasks with traces of ancient oils trapped inside. Small statues of Bas, the household protector god, placed on shelves that now lay horizontally on the seabed. Everything spoke of a world interrupted, but the most haunting finds of all were the ritual objects Goddio's team uncovered. a sacred barge buried near the main temple, a ceremonial ship used once a year in the Feast of the Canal, when a statue was carried across the water in a luminous procession. This barge was perfectly preserved, an ancient wooden vessel nearly 16 meters long. It had not moved since the night it sank. Archaeologists believe the barge was stored in a sacred chamber when the ground beneath it liquefied, pulling the entire structure downward in one piece. The people of Thonis-Heracleion worshipped gods who controlled the water, the river, the flood. Perhaps that is why so many religious artifacts were found underwater. Priests carried them as the temple sank, praying, hoping, believing that the gods might spare them. But the sea had already decided. And yet, there was still beauty. The statues of pharaohs and queens were breathtaking beneath the waves, their faces calm, their eyes half closed, their expressions almost serene. When divers shone their lights across the features carved in granite, it was as if the city had not drowned out of violence, but out of exhaustion, as if it simply lay down to sleep. Sand covered its streets like a blanket. Seagrass swayed where market tents once stood. Small fish swam through doorways where children once played. The ocean had not destroyed. Yon is Heracleion. It had preserved it, held it gently, protected it, kept it safe from the hands of time. This is why the city below the waves feels different from other ruins. Pompeii burned. Herculaneum was crushed by heat. Atlantis, if it existed, was torn apart by water. But Thonis-Heracleion was lowered, slowly, carefully, into the sea, as if the earth did not want to erase it, but only move it to a quieter place. But the story does not end here, for beneath the silence, the city still speaks through inscriptions, through relics, through stones carved with history, and these messages reveal a final truth about the last days of Yon is Heracleion, a truth hidden in laws, in taxes, in rituals, and in the slow shifting of power, a truth that explains why the city truly died. Every city dies twice, once in the body, and once in the memory. For Thonis-Heracleion, its body died overnight, in the collapse, the flooding, the violent shift of earth and sea, but its memory, its soul, its importance, was fading even before that final night. The signs were already written in stone, in law, in the quiet decisions of kings, because long before the sea claimed the city, a new power was rising to the west, a city built by a conqueror, a dream of marble and science and ambition, a city named Alexandria. When Alexander the Great arrived in Egypt in 332 BC, he envisioned a port that would take Egypt into the future, a city connected to Greece, to trade, to power, to knowledge, and so Alexandria was born. It grew fast, fast enough that even the gods felt the change. Scholars came, merchants came, philosophers came, libraries rose, lighthouses blazed, culture blended, power shifted, and with every stone laid in Alexandria, Thonis-Heracleion lost a piece of its purpose. For centuries, Thonis-Heracleion had been Egypt's main port, the gateway for foreign ships, the center of international trade, the home of religious rituals, the guardian of the Nile Delta. But now, Alexandria took these roles. Trade laws changed, taxes shifted, the pharaohs redirected merchants away from the old city and toward the new jewel of the empire, The great port of Thonis-Heracleion began to quiet. Its markets thinned. Its temples grew emptier. Fewer ships entered its harbor. Less gold flowed through its streets. The city was still alive, beautiful, ancient, sacred, but it was no longer Egypt's future. It had become its past. When archaeologists found the decree of Nectaneboi on a granite stele submerged in the sea, the truth became clear. The pharaoh had declared that foreign traders must pass through Thonis to pay their taxes. The law was necessary because merchants were avoiding the city, choosing faster, richer, newer ports. This decree was a lifeline, a last attempt to keep Thonis relevant. But history had already moved on. Cities do not die because of earthquakes alone. They die when the world stops needing them. Thonis-Heracleion was slowly becoming a relic, and then nature finished what time had already begun. When the earthquake struck, when the ground liquefied, when the sea surged inward, the city had no strength left, no armies, no wealth, no power, no protection. Alexandria was the new heart. Thonis was the fading shadow. And so, when the earth decided to reclaim the land, the city disappeared not only from the surface but from memory. Within a generation, few remembered its name. Within a century, it became a whisper. Within a millennium, it became legend. And then, nothing until the divers arrived. Until the machines scanned the deep, until the statues awoke in beams of blue light, and suddenly the city that history forgot was remembered by the sea. Beneath the thick layer of silt, archaeologists began to uncover a wealth of treasures. Massive statues of gods and pharaohs, gilded coins, and delicate jewelry glimmered as if untouched by time. Each artifact revealed the city's vibrant trade, religion, and daily life. Temples, partially buried, showed intricate carvings depicting ceremonies and rituals that had been lost for centuries. The underwater city became a living museum, where every object told the story of a civilization swallowed by the sea, yet preserved in astonishing detail. The legends of Thonis-Heracleion had survived in the writings of ancient Greek historians, speaking of a port city so prosperous it rivaled Alexandria. Sailors' tales told of cataclysmic storms and divine wrath, while myths described gods walking among mortals. Now, as divers explored the ruins, these myths gained a tangible presence. Temples dedicated to Amun-Gereb and other deities reflected the deep religious life of the city. It was a place where history and legend intertwined, showing how stories passed down through centuries could echo the very truth hidden beneath the waves. Today, Thonis-Heracleion is more than a submerged city. It is a symbol of resilience and the fragility of human achievement. Divers glide over sunken streets, temples, and marketplaces, imagining the bustling life that once thrived here. Modern technology and careful exploration allow us to piece together its story, revealing a civilization both mighty and vulnerable. The city may have vanished overnight, but its memory lives on, reminding us that even in loss, history endures. Thonis-Heracleion teaches a timeless lesson. The past is never truly gone, so long as we seek to uncover and remember it.